As we told you in our last hour, we're following some stunning new reporting into the former president's handling of White House documents. The New York Times, citing a person familiar with the matter, reports that the National Archives discovered what was thought to be classified information in the 15 boxes of documents Trump retrieved by National Archives from Mar-A-Lago last month, leading the National Archives to ask the Department of Justice to investigate Trump's handling of his records, as NBC News reported yesterday. NBC News has not independently verified the New York Times reporting, and the DOJ has declined to comment. The questions about how the former president handled his records have come under more scrutiny today. Axios was provided with an exclusive look at the hotly anticipated book about Trump by New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman that details how he dealt with documents. According to Axios, quote, while President Trump was in office, staff in the White House, presidents periodically discovered wads of printed paper clogging a toilet and believed the president had flushed pieces of paper down it. Joining us now is Peter Strzok, former FBI counterintelligence agent who led the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. He's also author of the book Compromise, which is now out in paperback. Pete Strzok, thank you so much for being with us. I just want to start with this. The idea of the president flushing important documents down the toilet, stuffing them in his mouth, feeding them to a bird, putting them through a shredder like Tom and Greg in Succession. I mean, like, I don't care what he's trying to do. From just an investigative standpoint, what should be the headline right now across the country about these allegations and possibly true behaviors of the former president?
I think the headline, Jason, is that the facts that have emerged are so great that it isn't possible for DOJ to ignore it any longer. I mean, there are a number of things going on here. The first is, as you indicated, Trump's attempts to rip up, swallow, flush, whatever the case may be, documents that should have been preserved as records. There's information that's come out that members of the White House staff were taking documents and placing them in classified burn bags to have them destroyed rather than preserve them. All those go to the Presidential Records Act. But what the game changer is that has happened is these allegations that have come out that there's potentially classified information that was maintained at Mar-A-Lago. Now, that changes everything because, as you know, the Presidential Records Act, yes, it's a law, but there's really a lack of any sort of enforcement mechanism. That absolutely isn't true when it comes to the mishandling of classified information. That's a federal felony, that it can be, you can be faced with fines or jail term or time in jail if you violate it. And that's the kind of thing that really changes the entire fact pattern here. And I think based on all of this is what is going to bring DOJ and the FBI in to investigate.
Now, Pete, I want to make this clear. You were part of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails and using them on an unsecured server. But I think there's an important distinction that you can lay out for the audience here. One of the things that you were known for is saying, hey, look, I want to make sure that when a letter was sent to Congress by the investigator, it's like by Comey, we think that this was her not being careful, right? You didn't necessarily think that there was malicious intent. What you're saying, or I think what we're seeing here is that we can assume malicious intent. We can assume a cover-up on the part of Trump with this sort of documentation, not just somebody who may not necessarily know the proper way to use emails, which is what we saw with former Secretary of State Clinton.
Well, I think that's a great point, and I'd make two arguments here. The first is, look, the FBI doesn't open investigations because a crime has occurred. In many cases, the FBI opens an investigation to ask the questions and to find out information to determine whether or not a crime has occurred. So, it seems there are a lot of unanswered questions here about what this sort of classified information is, if it exists at all, but those are specifically the kind of questions that the FBI asks as part of conducting an investigation. And the second point is the hardest thing when you look at criminal mishandling of classified information, inevitably one of the hardest things to determine is the intent of what the person was when they did it, whether they knew it was wrong, whether they were trying to do it in variance with the law. And again, when you look at President Trump, former President Trump, if you want to say, well, did he know this was wrong? On the one hand, reporting is that he was told repeatedly, look, you can't tear up these documents. These are records. You can't go flushing them down the toilet. You need to preserve them. And when it comes to classified information, I mean, take your pick of the dozens and dozens and dozens of campaign rallies where he led chants of lock her up, specifically because he said Hillary Clinton had classified information on her server and in her unclassified emails, and that's wrong and she should go to jail. So there is no argument for any jury, for DOJ to be able to come in and play videotape after videotape after videotape of former President Trump saying having unauthorized retention of classified information is against the law. I mean, it's a slam dunk argument when it comes to trying to establish what he knew was and wasn't against the law.
I want to close with this because the DOJ is a key part of this. It would be the next step. It strikes me that the DOJ has almost made itself incompetent, ineffective by being so concerned about being apolitical or everything else like that. We have the Mueller report, which laid out multiple ways that Trump and many of his cronies tried to obstruct justice. We now have information about documents being destroyed one way or another. What is taking the Department of Justice so long in bringing up substantive charges against the former president and members of his administration? This seems like an open and shut case to me, but maybe I've been watching too much Law and Order.
I think DOJ has to be prudent whenever you go about investigating somebody at the level of course, a former president of the United States, but even people who are cabinet officials. There is a great deal of care that needs to be taken to make sure that there's a legitimate predication there. But look, in my mind, this is clearly beyond that threshold. If you look in the past, what the FBI investigated in terms of former CIA Director John Deutsch, in terms of former National Security Advisor Sandy Berger, General Petraeus, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, there is a clear path that DOJ takes when they investigate these things. And to say they want to be apolitical, in my mind, to hesitate to look at Trump isn't apolitical. It's kind of the opposite of that. This is Trump who, through tantrums and threats and 4 years of behavior, has caused people to back away from doing the very basic thing that the FBI should be doing. And that is, in my opinion, in this case, a very clear set of facts that merit opening an investigation to find out just what were the facts and circumstances surrounding this classified information that may have been found in his possession at Mar-A-Lago.
Right. It's not apolitical to not go after crooks. Pete Strzok, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.